Heart teacher, the most popular one. And so, evidently, as a mother, I was not very adept at pulling teeth. So they didn't, our three daughters who went to the Rosary did not want me to pull their teeth. They waited until they could see Miss Little, and she pulled all of my children's teeth.
I pulled all of their teeth. I mean, it was like, and one of the teachers, the first grade teacher, Sue Westfall, she made a sign with dentist Little, and the tooth on it and everything. I mean, it was good. And then even started to give out the little tooth carrot.
So after she left Academy of Sacred Heart from Rosary in New Orleans, she entered religious life, and she went to Houston, then to our Sacred Heart School for Boys, Stewart Hall in San Francisco, then Carrollton School of the Sacred Heart in Miami, and then
Because I went 3 years in New York, but I was at a nativity, Jesuit nativity school, and then I came here.
Here, how long were you elementary at?
6 years.
6 years, so anyway. So she's back at the Academy of Sacred Heart in New Orleans now. And so I am telling her every chance I get, we really need a religious of the Sacred Heart. So anyway, maybe one day. But anyway, so Sister Little is my friend, and so if you tell me anything bad about her, I cannot be objective. I will not agree with you. So anyway, we're delighted that you're here today. She has expertise in spiritual direction, and that's what she'll be talking to us about. Do you have a prayer, Mary?
We just have our opening prayer that we shared last week. We get into it in a second, but you guys can just pray for me in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Blessed Mother of God, we chose you to be our Queen, our advocate, our Mother. We firmly resolve to be devoted to you and to do what we can to encourage others to be devoted to you. We entrust the renewal and spiritual growth in our lives to you. Help us to be women and men of faith and prayer just like you. We promise to be faithful disciples of your Son, Jesus Christ, and to proclaim the news of his love for all people. May our every endeavor be directed and guided according to the will of your Son, which is your wish, by the aid of your prayers and special favor with God.
So Mary, thank you for volunteering to be our president. It took me 9 years to find somebody who would agree to be our president, and then at the same time to find a religious of the Sacred Heart to be our moderator, Sister Lynn Lear. So anyway, we're delighted that you are with us today, Sister
Thank you.
Little.
Thank
So where's Elizabeth? Is more coffee coming?
Yeah, she got it.
More coffee is here?
More coffee's here, yeah?
More coffee's here.
Okay,
And
great.
agendas are.
All right, we'll have 2 times as much next time.
Yes.
So thank you to each of you for joining. So
If you are here for the first time, would you stand up so we can see? Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. This is the leader.
I am overwhelmed at the number of people that are here. Lynn did not tell me how many people are, and I even texted her, I said, Lynn, how many people are you talking about? Because I want to get some handouts. Well, I don't think I got enough handouts. But anyway, it's just wonderful to see you all with the Children of Mary, because I know we have Children of Mary also in New Orleans, and I don't know if they're that big in New Orleans. But anyway, so it's just so wonderful that that tradition is, because that's a St. Mal and Sophie tradition, that it's still to this day is alive and well. So Lynn said, Maureen, would you give a talk on spiritual direction? And I said, yeah, I guess that's easy. And let me tell you how I got into spiritual direction. I am a certified spiritual director. And about 10 years ago, when I moved back to New Orleans, I needed to find a spiritual director, because I had one when I was here, but it would have been going back and forth. And we, as religious of the Sacred Heart, are encouraged to have spiritual directors. St. Mal and Sophie always believed in having a spiritual director. then find a spiritual director. And it wasn't going to your parish priest anymore. It was finding someone who was experienced in spiritual direction. So I found a new spiritual director when I went to New Orleans, Sister Dot, and love her to this day. She's my spiritual director. Unfortunately, next year she's going to be leaving, and she's going to Kentucky. And I said, what am I going to do? And she said, you're going to call me every month. And I said, oh yeah, okay, that's what we're going to do. And which I had to do during COVID. I had to Zoom with my spiritual directees, because we couldn't meet in person. Anyway, so probably about 2 years or 3 years into it, 2 years, she said, I want you to become a spiritual director. And I said, oh, well, tell me what that entails. Well, you have to study, and you have to go through a course. And I said, I don't want to study. I said, I'm tired of studying. I said, you going to give me a test? Do I have to take a test? And she said, no, you don't have to take a test. Well, we had to write these, I forget even what they're called now, and that was harder than a test, because you had to direct somebody and write word for word what they said. Well, that was just almost disastrous for me, but I did it. So after 2 years, you certified to become a spiritual director. So since then, when I prayed about it, and I said, why not? I said, I love spiritual direction. I love every month going to spiritual direction. And I said, I think I'm pretty good at listening. And I also said, I said, when I start to pull myself away from school, which I'm still teaching, that would be a wonderful vocation, ministry to have, is to be a spiritual director. So for the last 7 years or so, I've been a spiritual director. And I have wonderful directees. I don't ever want to lose them. That's just one of the, so what do I do? Okay. I'm going to read some of what is written so that you can get all the words, but I'll tell you practically what I do. It says, what should someone expect in a spiritual direction, as a spiritual director? Okay, does anybody in here have a spiritual director? Of course you do, Mike. See, you should have one. It's not a scary thing at all. In fact, it's really something that's quite easy to do. So what should you expect if you consider a spiritual director? One resource for personal development that grows straight out of Ignatian spirituality is spiritual direction. Spiritual direction. A spiritual director walks alongside a person as a spiritual companion and somewhat as a guide. Directing is a bit misleading, because a true spiritual director does not give much direction in terms of suggestion what a person should do, or telling he or she what's right or what's wrong. A spiritual director is not a teacher, not a drill sergeant of the soul. He or she offers presence and listening ear. When called for, a spiritual director offers wisdom as well, and sometimes will help the directee imagine and dream in prayer. Now, I talk about St. Ignatius Loyola here because my training was in Ignatian spirituality, in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. And all of St. Ignatius, all of his life, that's really what he did. He wrote the spiritual exercises. Once he decided that he wasn't going to go and be a soldier anymore, he found that reading books about saints were much more intriguing to him than it was reading novels about chivalry. So that's kind of where his conversion. He was injured, and during his injury, he was converted really, and so his journey until the end of his life was writing the spiritual exercises, and of course he founded the Society of Jesus. St. Ignatius was quite clear really strong terms, he encouraged spiritual directors to stay out of God's way and allow the Creator to deal directly with the creature. This doesn't mean that the spiritual director sits there silently like the stereotypical analyst. He or she enters conversation with you, and your topic of conversation is generally about your relationship with God. And that's it. Spiritual direction is, how do you want to grow your relationship with God? How much do you want God in your life? How much more do you want God in your life? Where has God been in your life? Where is God now? And where do you want God in your life? That was one of Ignatius's thoughts. Although there is much flexibility in what vocabulary you use or what concept about the interior life you explore. Generally speaking, that is what to expect of a spiritual director. A person willing to walk alongside with you on your spiritual journey. This person can walk with you in silence or in dialogue, in peaceful times or terrible times. The point is to be present. A companion who will listen attentively and reflect back to you what you are experiencing and discovering. Confidentiality. What you talk about in your time with your spiritual director will go no further. Nobody really knows who I have as directees unless they know the person or they have suggested that that person come to me for spiritual direction. Encouragement and hope. An effective spiritual director always carries hope for you and gently nudges you towards the wisdom and grace of God. It's already poured into your life. Reverence and respect for the spiritual movement in your life. A wise spiritual director recognizes that God speaks to people in many different ways. The spiritual companion listens to you, describes your experience as it makes sense to you in words and phrases that are meaningful to you. Although he or she may help you connect your experience with spiritual concepts such as grace, the movement of the Spirit, there's no attempt to rewrite your experience to be anything other than what it is. A person wise enough to understand when you need help that is different from spiritual direction. An attentive spiritual director will notice if you appear to be physically, emotionally, or mentally ill and will encourage you to get the support you need. I am not an analyst. I am not a therapist. In other words, a spiritual director recognizes that she is not your social worker or your psychiatrist and will not try to fill that role. A person with whom you are safe to talk about your interior life in all its complexities and unfolding beauty. When a person comes to me and says, I would like spiritual direction, and first of all I ask, do you know what a spiritual director is? And she said, well, I'm not sure, but she said, I think I do. And I said, well, I am here to help you grow your relationship with God, to help you find God in your life. Ignatius said that we should find God in everything, every person, everything we do. And so basically that's what I try to say to them. I want to be on your journey with you, on your faith journey. And wherever you are, that's where we'll be. And so then I start to ask questions. Have you ever had spiritual direction? No, most of the time. Okay. Then I start to talk, because then if I find, as I'm talking and the person is unfolding her life, I'll ask, like, what are the patterns? What are your prayer patterns? What do you love about your faith? What gives you the greatest satisfaction about your faith? Where is God in your life? Do you have a special time when you pray? Do you have special devotions? Are you devoted to Mary? Sometimes I'll ask. Or are you, some people say, I love going to adoration. That's great. I mean, that's just, there you are with God right there. So it's a conversation that we have. And during this conversation, I listen very, very carefully. Like it says, I'm present. And I will see, okay, where is this person, he or she? What are they looking for? And so I'll ask questions that something they've said, and I'll say, oh, so you need a more structured prayer life. Yeah, I do. I need a much more structured prayer life. Okay. Do you journal? Yes and no. Do you, what other practices of your faith do you have? So it's learning about that person. And also during the conversation, like I said, I listen mostly, is seeing if that person will fit with me. And if I think that person fits with me, after our conversation is all said and done, I'll say, what would you like to do? And she'll say, or he'll say, well, I want to continue. And so I'll say, okay, let's continue. Now, there have been times that I have all of a sudden said, I don't think this is a fit. And I'll suggest that, maybe you're looking for something that's not what I can give you, but I'm not supposed to be it's not me. I said it's God. God, this is all about God's business. This is not my business. And so most of the time, the person pretty much can choose their spiritual director. At the Spirituality Center, where I was trained, this is the office is in Metairie, Louisiana. I'm going to pass this out so you can read a little bit about the internship program of Faith Companion, and this is some information about spiritual direction. And but anyway, the center is in Metairie, but people are trained here in Grancato. There are many, many people that have been trained here in Grancato because Sister Dot has classes here every year. She trains spiritual directors right here in Grancato. So there are a lot of us from the Spirituality Center that are around this area, like the Diocese of Baton Rouge, Diocese of Lafayette, not so much the Diocese of St. Charles, but we even have one of the people I have in my peer supervision group is from Freeport. So I guess we pretty much, when people want good spiritual direction, a course in spiritual direction, they do go to the Spirituality Center, and many people Zoom. But anyway, so what you do is if you're ever interested in spiritual direction, you should say, okay, how do I start this process? One of the ways, I can give you this booklet, but you can call the Jesuits over here in Grancato, and their program, pretty many of, I don't know if it is anymore, because now it's brand new. That program is a brand new program. And I know they have spiritual direction. I know they're giving retreats, but they're starting all over again, I guess, with the idea of how they're going to run that spirituality center. But anyway, a lot of the people that are there, the directors, are they were trained by Sister Dot. And before Sister Dot, it was Jerry Fagan, and Noel Toomey was another person that trained people in spiritual direction. So that's where you would start if you are really interested in spiritual direction. But let me read this to you too. You can stop me anytime you want to ask a question, but let me give you a lot of information so you can see what's the question. what spiritual direction is meant to do in your life. It's meant to support you in your personal relationship with God. That's the biggest thing. And in your life, you're young, middle, a little bit older than middle, a little bit old like me. You're in different places in your life. And so your personal relationship with God is going to be different. But wherever you are, to help us become ever more aware of God's presence in our life and more responsive to God's healing. It's like when you leave spiritual direction, you go, gosh, I feel so good. Okay, it's like a high you get on, you know. It's just like you really feel like, whoa, you know, I do have a good relationship with God. God does love me more than anything in the whole world. Then, to grow in an awareness of our feelings towards God and not simply our thoughts about God. Most of us, we talk. And I think we exhaust God sometimes. Because all God wants us to do sometimes is just sit in silence and listen. Because he has a lot to say to us. And sometimes we're just not open to hearing it. We have our own agenda. God may have a different agenda for you. He may have something else for you. Then to help us notice, own, and to share with God our struggles, our joys, our hopes, our pain, our gratitude. God wants to hear all that. But then sit back and, like it said when I was explaining spiritual direction, sometimes there can be silence. Sometimes somebody says something, directly says something to me, I'm going, gotta be quiet right now. There's something going on right now. The spirit, God's telling me something right now. Because it's not me. God is really the guy. I'm just trying to listen to what he's saying to me so that I can help the person in front of me. To notice ever more clearly God's presence in our daily life and daily prayer. To be sensitive to interior changes within us and the effects these changes have on our relationship, including our relationship with prayer. To allow God's love to lead us into a life of acceptance and hope. Now, when you go to spiritual direction, you're going to talk about your life. You're going to talk about, I know everybody's kids, I know their grandchildren, I know their husbands, I know everything about them, because that's part of their life. That's who, you know, they live in relationship, of course, with husband, wife, family, but they also, you know, that relationship is, God's above that relationship, because who's supposed to be the main person in our life? God. And when I teach 8th grade religion, and when I tell the girls that, I said, who's the most important person in your life? My mother, my father, my friend, blah, 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 blah. I said, no. God's the most important person in your life. And they go, they're not too sure about that. They don't believe me. A lot of them don't believe me. Well, you mean, you telling me I'm supposed to put, they call me sis. You telling me I'm supposed to put God before my mother and my father and my grandmother and my grandfather? I said, God is number one in your life. Who were you created by? Who put you here? God put you here. So anyway, your life does come out in spiritual direction. And there may be struggles that you're going through. Sometimes young people that I have directed, it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I said, do you think you have a vocation? I'm not sure about that. Okay? Well, then if they say yes, or I'm not sure, then perhaps this is a time to discern that. Do you have, it's all about discernment. Do you have a vocation? or what is your vocation in life? Is it to be a married person? Is it to marry the person that you are with right now? So I very much get into their life, but in that life, it's always, where is God though? Where is your relationship with God? Because that's key to this whole spirituality, spiritual direction. So, with everything I've given you,